Okay, so yeah, that was a little bit of a thrash last night with the getting the dash out, but I did get it out. And thanks for the comment regarding the blank uh, segment in the video. I just put the phone, didn't turn it off, put it camera down, and it was recording my audio, but not my video. So I'm trying to edit that. Uh, but let's take a look at the two dashes and see if there's any differences. So, of course, this is the one from the 87 normally aspirated. It's an automatic, but that shouldn't make any difference. And then this is the one I took out last night. Airbag, so that's the biggest difference. So on the airbag dash, you got this flap, which I guess the vinyl breaks when the airbag goes off. Or maybe it's a seam. Not sure about that. I did go to Clark's page, and it gives a pretty detailed description of taking the dash out and putting it back in. And I found another page, I forgot what the address was, regarding the airbags. And I'll explain a little bit more. The power does go through, for the DME, for the ECU, it passes through the airbag control module. And we'll take a look at that before we put the dash in. So you can't just pull the control module out. However, if the airbags are disconnected, you shouldn't get an airbag warning light. I think that's how that works. There is an option to put a jumper on the airbag module connector, the main connector for the module, and that will defeat everything. It'll allow power to go to the ECU, no warning light. So that's probably the best way to go when you're swapping these dashes out. Other than that, the only difference I'm seeing right now is, of course, I need to pull that bracket and put it on this dash, but I think I'm going to do that after I get the good dash in the car, because like I was saying last night, that's pretty tight up against, there's actually two brackets. There's a low bracket and a high bracket, and they kind of mesh together. So I'll put the replacement dash in and then move the bracket. And then oddly, looks like they did a little different taping method at the factory, or somebody pulled the tape off of this one. Hard to say. There's some cutouts here that are not present on the other one, on the replacement dash, although they're just smaller. So I'm not sure what that's all about. I mean, probably on both these cars, I know on the turbo car the dash had been in and out probably several times. But on the parts car from Kentucky, hard to say. I suspect that when I pulled the dash out, it's probably the first time it's ever been out, because it's just the way all the fasteners came out and everything. So anyway, let's move on. So that's the airbag control module, and I think I'd have to pull that board up to show you the connector. Let me see. I know it's down in there somewhere, but anyway, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to try it just leaving the airbag. Well, obviously the new replacement dash will not have airbags, so these will be basically floating. Probably tie wrap them back, and then of course I won't have anything attached to this bracket. I'm curious if the Kentucky car has the bracket. See if that's the case. Other than that, everything should be the same. There's that lower bracket I was just talking about, so that stays in place. And so I'm gonna do a little cleanup in here and then start wiggling that replacement dash into place. Okay, so the first thing I'm seeing, first problem, there's going to be plenty of them, is the drain tubes on the A-pillars are falling out of the little, where they go into the body. That's a common problem. Those drain tubes shrink over time, and now's the time to correct that, because that will be buried under the dash. So I think what I'm going to try to do is see if I got some heat shrink that'll fit over the tube and the receptacle and fix that. To me, heat shrink is the best way to go. You can see the other side is falling out too. And that'll be a great fix moving forward. So didn't have the right size heat shrink. What I did do is I used my heat gun to warm up the drain tube because it was really cold and brittle, and then just gently pulled on it to lengthen it, and then got it in the opening down there and wrapped it with some electrical. That'll hold it in place. So after I stretched it, I also pushed down on this crimp. The other side had pretty good length. Same thing, just gave it a couple wraps with electrical to kind of hold it in the drain tube while I fit the dash in there. So as you're pushing the dash in, you got to kind of feed the ducts onto the vents, and at least get them lined up, because they'll keep you from pushing the dash in. And just kind of make sure all your connectors are getting fed through the appropriate gaps in the dash. So once these tabs kind of line up on the A-pillar, just put those screws in loosely, kind of hold the dash in place. And then the next thing will be these screws on the side here. That's odd. So this dash only has one screw. The other one, if you remember, had another screw up here. Well, that's interesting. Okay, well, that's just an extra screw. Also, be sure to get back in there and put that rod back on your defroster flapper. I've got it back in. I just need to pull that little clip forward. Do that with the small needle nose. Okay, so I got all the pieces parts from the dash out of storage. So it looks like the pieces that are specifically brown would be the glove box cover and the vents. The rest of it appears to be the same. The side covers are black, so that's what was on the turbo car, and all that other is just black. So, but I do have the option on these front panels, if those little tabs are broken, I can use these from the parts car. And if you remember, I was missing the bulb on the clock. I may just swap the whole clock. But, so I've got options as far as what I use, putting it back together. So I'm putting this console bracket back in. It's the top bracket, not the one that joins onto the tunnel. And there appears to be one difference in that, I don't know if you can see this, you've got a bolt that goes into the dash here, and then this one up top here. On the replacement dash, there is not a bolt hole for the lower one, so it's just going to attach at the top in 2 spots instead of 4. Another thing I wanted to show you guys is this drain tube. Of course, it'd been better without the without this bracket in the way, but anyway, that drain tube back there You want to take a look at that, because on this car, that just fractured, and when I got the air conditioner working, was leaking condensate all over the floorboard. And with the console in there, that is a real hard tube to replace, and it's a special tube, obviously the contour and everything, but now's the time to replace it. If it looks like it's fractured and it's failing, go ahead and do it now, because it's a lot easier to get to right now. So I was struggling to get that top bracket on, and it was all about the holes at the top, right? And I took a close look at it, pulled it back out. That's the bracket from the turbo, putting it back in, right? The bracket from the normally aspirated is completely different. So it doesn't have a top half and a bottom half. It's just one bracket. So that goes down on the tunnel, and there's only one attachment point on the dash at the top, and it's a smaller screw. So I could potentially put this bracket in, but I think I'm going to go ahead and put the original bracket back in and just not attach it to the dash up top, unless I can get it to line up and put a smaller screw in it. I think the reason engineers did this is all about the airbag, and they're strengthening the whole dash to accommodate the airbag. So I put this smaller bracket in, but I think it might cause problems if the console, which I thought the consoles on these cars were all the same on the late cars as far as their size and dimensions and all that stuff, but I'm just a little leery of using this older one. Plus, it's not in as good a shape as this one, so that's what I'm running with for now. So I'm going to try to get all these bulbs working. The first one, I pulled the bulb out of that little light that goes in that fitting up there, and what that does is it goes down a little clear plastic tunnel and lights up your vent defrost switch. So anyway, I just ohmed out that lamp was no good. So I went to the climate control unit from the donor car and pulled that bulb out of the donor climate control, and it's the same bulb, and I'm going to stick it in that socket. It ohmed out as good. So the secret to getting those connectors on the back of the climate control unit is reach from the back side of the vent and press them on, because they didn't leave enough cable to do much of anything. So I'm going to screw that thing back in, and then we'll go to this other one. Okay, uneventful here. That panel snapped on nicely, no problems. So I think the next one I'm going to do is the ignition panel, and I'll compare it, because I know there's some tabs broken on the one that came out. I'll compare it with the one that came out of the donor car and see if it's any better. Okay, so what I found on these panels, ignition panel I call it, is this is the one that came out of the car. It's been trimmed. The two tabs are broken off. That's the wiper rheostat, and there's some other broken tabs here. So I looked at the donor car, and it's got screw holes. So the original one, somebody's trimmed those off, or they've broken off. The donor car panel has this mounting piece in place, So it's a little bit better shape. But the two tabs. So bottom line, I'm going to put this one in. I've got to take the control unit back out, the HVAC control unit. I suspect the same thing's going on this panel here, because there's a remnant underneath there. So I'll deal with that here in a second. But so those two side panels should have gone under the control unit. But what came out of this car did not. So there you go. So I'll put a little RTV to hold that wiper control switch on there. And now I'm gonna, while that cures up, I'm gonna go over here and put this other panel on, or at least start testing the panel. And I gotta compare it, because yeah, as we found, it may not be complete. So this is the panel out of the donor car. It's got the bulb for the clock. The cigarette lighter's a little rusty, but you can see it's the tab that goes under the heater control is broken off on it. And then of course this is from the turbo car, so I'm just going to move the bulb over to here. Otherwise, you know, the flasher switch tabs are in good shape. It's staying in place. Everything seems to be okay. So also, well, let's look at something. The clock on the turbo car's got a crack in it. So I may move the whole clock over. Yeah, I think that would be the way to go. I'd also like to see if the clock worked. I'd have to give it 12 volts. I mean, there's chances of the clock working are probably pretty remote. But I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to move the whole clock over. So I almost forgot to transfer my glove box lock over. You got to do that before you put that panel on. So I have the cigarette lighter reconnected and the clock and the flasher switch. So troublesome part is getting this tube back on. Let me see. Oh, crap. That, which is not very long, so I'm going to have to kind of stick it on there as I put the panel on. And you also want to leave this end loose to get the vent down in there. Get this thing lined up where that little rod, square rod, can feed in there. I just got the one screw down here at the orifice end just to hold it in place. So let me grab the brown vent and stick it in there. So here's a good example of what one of the things you need to be looking for. This came out of the donor car, and that linkage is off on those vanes. So before I start trying to pop that in on those little axles, I guess you call them, I don't know, tabs, I'm going to warm this thing up because it's a little cold right now, and all that plastic will have a tendency to break. And if it's warm, it'll do a lot better. Everything else seems to be present. There's that square rod. Probably wouldn't hurt to clean it up some. But yeah, that's a common thing. And usually that's broke. So your vanes don't work properly. It's interesting that it's off, but it's all the little tabs are still present. So I got that vent in and the linkage, which was a little tricky because you had to line up all of those little tabs and then press it. You couldn't do that with it inside of the car. You got to do it on the bench. And then I was able to get that rod into the linkage in there. I'm going to wait on this cover because I think even before I get the glove box in, I want to hook everything up, get the steering wheel back in and the switches and all that stuff, instrument gauges, and I want to start the car up before I really button things up. Probably do it before I put the radio and stuff like that back in, because if I have to dig back in here, I don't want to have to be pulling all the trim again. So as I'm putting this panel over the ignition here on, I'm thinking that this switch assembly has to be in place, but it actually kind of goes hand in hand. I mean, you've got to get those two big white connectors, and then there's another smaller multi-pin Molex. I've already got it stuffed in there. It goes to the cruise control. You've got to get all that connected really before you put this panel on. So I kind of did it simultaneously. I left the panel a little loose, then I started pushing the switch assembly back on, made all the connections, and just kind of worked everything in there together. So I'm going to finish putting screws in the ignition switch panel, and then screw in the climate control because it's still dangling, and then I can move on. Okay, so the next panel is the headlight switch. Dimmer switch goes here, fog lights. So I'm testing the dimmer. I've got my multimeter set on ohms and just running it back and forth. It appears to be working. Ohms go up. I mean, it might be a little intermittent. It does settle down eventually. I mean, it's a pretty simple device. There's a little wiper that goes across the coil. I don't know if you can see it down inside there. I've taken them apart before. And that gets a little crusty, and I sprayed some contact cleaner in there. So I'm going to try it. I mean, if it doesn't work, I can always bypass it. You can take the connector that goes to the dimmer and just put a jumper in it, and that'll bypass it completely. You know, I'm going to put new LED lamps in it. I got from 944 online. Ian, great supplier. Really helps me out by shipping quickly. All right, so I got the driver's side vent in the opening, and now I'm going to put in the headlight switch panel. So now let's take a look at the gauge cluster. So this is the 951 turbo cluster. Note that it'll be different from an NA car in that it has a boost gauge. I guess there would be 4 different kinds of clusters. In a normally aspirated cluster would look like this, except with no boost gauge, I think. This is out of that donor car, and it was automatic. So it's actually got indicators for what your automatic transmission is in, selectors. And there's a cable associated with that that's not on the other clusters. Otherwise, the layout's pretty much the same. So if you had a turbo with an automatic, I would assume, I don't know that I've ever seen one, it would have the indicators and see how they cut off the tachometer to put the indicators in. So yeah, probably 4 different kinds. Let's look at the back. So on the turbo car, appears there's some bulbs missing, but I'm not sure those actually go to anything. Let's look at this gauge cluster. It's missing the same slots. Of course, who's been monkeying around with these things. And there's a nice spider hiding in there. So anyway, your bulbs are in these little twisties, and you just twist them out. And I don't know that you can actually pull the bulb out of that little socket. I think it comes all together. I was trying that earlier on the clock and it just broke. So let's see what Ian sent me on the bulbs. So I have 17 of the smaller ones and then 3 of the big ones. Now the bigger ones are associated with the front of gauge illuminator. And let me show you something here. Somebody's already done a mod where they put silver reflective tape. They call them light pipes. Basically, that bulb shines into that duct and it comes out on the face of the gauge. On this instrument cluster, you can see what happens. They're originally coated with silver paint, and that degrades, so that's just going to spill out. No light is going to be transmitted. So that's actually a pretty common retrofit. So with LEDs, this thing should be in pretty good shape. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So that would account for all the bulbs. Okay, so I'm going to start swapping all these out. So after you pull these out, you want to check for corrosion on the little copper contacts. This actually looks pretty good. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody hadn't cleaned these up whenever they did the retrofit on the light pipes. These are a little crusty. I'm going to use a Dremel with a little brush on it, and that way you get good contact. So if somebody had retrofitted the light pipes to LED, but I know they weren't very bright, so maybe they just weren't very good. You basically pull them out of that socket, and then here's the ones that I got from 944 online. Appear to be better quality. So get rid of the offending LED lamp and put in the new. So start with the 2 connectors on the right hand side, because you can actually get those on with it kind of half in, half out. And then the one on the left hand side, you'll have to kind of reach behind it as you bring it in and connect it. Okay, with the instrument cluster in, I think the only thing else I'd be concerned about having in before testing would be the horn button, which is associated with that airbag. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in. I'm going to probably go ahead and put the steering wheel in as well. Leave all the rest of the trim off and start seeing what's not working anymore. Hopefully nothing. Okay, so on this assembly here, it's spring loaded, and if you read those instructions there, basically you want to take the clock spring to the middle position. So you go turn it all the way clockwise or counterclockwise. I guess it doesn't really matter. And then back it up 4.5 turns. And you can see there's a notch there. That's where this tab goes. However, one thing I did notice when I mounted it, and I don't think I have the switch assembly in exactly the right spot, because anyway, when I slide it on, it's not coming flush. I think I've got the switch assembly pushed too far forward. And also I noted that the cruise control is bumping up against the trim piece. So I'm going to loosen that switch assembly up and back it out about 1/4 inch. And I think that'll be the sweet spot. Okay, checking this out in the dark. So warning lights work, that's good. Turn on headlights. Instrument lights up really nice. Headlights come up. High beam, low beam. Now the high beam indicator light is not working. That's not a deal killer. Curious about the bar indicator. It's showing 1/2 bar. It shouldn't really show that right now. Well, once we fire the engine up, maybe that'll go down. Yeah, the instruments are much brighter, so that's good. Just missing a couple of I used to have the parking brake light working, but it's no longer functional. So I mean, it's better. It's not perfect, but it's better. And look, all the heater stuff is all lit up, so that's good. And the cigarette lighter is lit up, so well, that's progress. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and button it up, I guess. Okay, I've got the instrument surround on, the heater controller, need to put those knobs back on. I did both of those side trim pieces. One note regarding the instrument surround: make sure your body nuts inside of there on the face of the dash are lined up, because after you've been monkeying around and everything, those body nuts slide around. If they're not in the right spot, you won't get your screws in. So next thing, I'm going to move to the glove box and get that all put together. Okay, so if you look at the two glove boxes, the one on the right is the original turbo, and the other one's from the donor car. Note that the normally aspirated car, the donor car, is deeper than the turbo, and I guess this all has to do with airbags. So what I found out was, when I was trying to put the door, glove box door, on the from the donor car, it's got a different contour, where it, if you look at the contour that came out of the turbo car, it's got this ridge. So anyway, it doesn't fit right. So I'm going to have to transfer this interior of the glove box to this to get that brown finish. I mean, it's no big deal. It's just about a dozen screws, that's all. But it's the only way it's going to fit right. And there's yet another difference. That felt joins on the original linen interior. It's got 4 extra screw holes, which oddly, this piece has got receptacles, or they just didn't put them in. So it must have something to do with the airbag or the turbo model or whatever. Another thing I noted is that your striker plate is actually adjustable. It appears to be spring loaded or something, so you can adjust just how tightly the lid closes. So yeah, I did not know that. Okay, so I moved the guts from one to the other, and that's also this hook, which is supposed to be fixed to the shell, but it's broken. But it'll help. It's kind of captured by that felt. So now I'm going to take this back and see how it fits. Okay, I got the glove box in. It's still a little wonky. I got a gap there, but I can address that later. It's just, yeah, the reason the normally aspirated box non-airbag car is deeper because the airbag module's not back there in the back, so they could make the glove box deeper. So that's what I'm running with. Okay, I'm gonna take a break. I think this is wearing me out, and I'll come back to it tomorrow. I mean, it's good progress. The dash looks better. Of course, this one, you know, once I get the cover on it, it'll be nice. And you know, I haven't monkeyed up too much stuff. So what's left is the console, the stereo, steering wheel, and then all the trim on the A-pillars and the header. So that's going to be a project for tomorrow. Thanks for watching.